who's actually going to get the most out of a mobile heated cabinet, and who would be better off putting their money elsewhere. If you're wondering whether the Cres Cor H138 CC3MC5Q is the right fit for a modest home workshop, a busy makerspace, or a small business that needs reliable heat without the hassle of a permanent installation, you're not alone. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. The big question most of us face before clicking Add to Cart is whether the price tag translates into real-world value or if we're just buying another piece of equipment that will sit idle because it doesn't match our workflow. When I started looking into mobile heated cabinets, the first thing that tripped me up was the sheer variety of options. Some units are built like mini industrial ovens, others feel more like oversized travel cases with a heating element strapped inside. The risk of ending up with a cabinet that's either too underpowered for a serious project or overly complicated for occasional use is real, especially when the listings are full of vague marketing speak. That's why I dug a little deeper, reading what people in similar situations say about the balance between portability, temperature stability, and overall cost of ownership. The Cres Cor H138 CC3MC5Q positions itself as a mobile heated cabinet, which basically means you can roll it from one workstation to another, plug it in, and have a controlled heat environment without needing to bolt anything to a wall. For a hobbyist who builds custom PC rigs, a maker who frequently needs to preheat plastics for bending, or a small electronics shop that does batch soldering, that flexibility can be a game changer. Imagine you're in a shared makerspace where bench space is premium. You can wheel the cabinet in, heat it up, run your job, and then move it out of the way for the next user. That kind of just-in-time heating saves floor space and avoids the need for a permanent, dedicated heating station. On the flip side, if your work is confined to a single bench and you never need to move the unit, the mobility premium may not be worth the extra cost. A stationary cabinet typically offers more insulation and sometimes higher temperature ranges for the same price. So, the first practical decision point is, do you need the wheels, or would a fixed unit be a better investment? One of the practical strengths that shows up in real-world usage is how the cabinet handles heat distribution. Users who have tried similar mobile units often complain about hot spots or uneven warming that can ruin a batch of components. The Cres Cor design incorporates a fan-assisted circulation system that keeps the interior temperature relatively uniform. In a scenario where you're curing a batch of 3D printed parts that need consistent heat to avoid warping, that even airflow can mean the difference between a usable piece and a cracked one. It also helps when you're drying out moisture-sensitive electronics. The uniform environment reduces the risk of pockets of condensation that could cause failures later on. However, that same fan system introduces a subtle trade-off. While the airflow smooths temperature gradients, it also adds a low-level hum that some users notice in a quiet workshop. If you're setting up a home lab where you record video tutorials or need a near-silent environment, that hum could be a minor annoyance. It's not a deafening roar, but it's enough that you might need to position the cabinet a few feet away from a microphone. Power consumption is another everyday concern. Mobile heated cabinets usually run off a standard 120V outlet, but the heating element draws enough current that you'll want a dedicated circuit if you plan to run it for extended periods. In practice, I've seen people set the cabinet to a moderate temperature and let it run for a couple of hours to preheat components before a job. The electricity bill impact is modest for occasional use, but if you're thinking about keeping it at a high temperature 24/7, the cost adds up quickly. So, if you're a small business that needs a continuously heated environment, you might want to compare the operating costs of a mobile unit versus a more energy-efficient stationary oven. Safety is a non-negotiable factor for any heated appliance. The Cres Cor model includes an automatic shutoff that triggers if the internal temperature exceeds a set safety threshold, and the outer shell stays relatively cool to the touch even when the interior is hot. That design choice is especially helpful in a shared space where a junior technician might be reaching for a tool and accidentally brush the cabinet. In contrast, some cheaper mobile cabinets have poorly insulated exteriors that can cause burns, so the built-in safety features are a genuine selling point here. Now, let's talk about capacity. The H138 in the model name hints at a roughly 138-liter internal volume, which is enough space for a decent batch of items but not a full-scale production run. If you're a small batch craftsman, that size is perfect. You can fit a handful of printed circuit boards, a few molds, or a stack of heat-sensitive lenses.